All right, so let's get into this. We've all seen a course syllabus, right? It's usually this dense document you get on the first day. But what if that dry list of rules wasn't just bureaucracy, but a meticulously engineered blueprint for success, especially in a field where mistakes can be catastrophic?
Exactly.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into the architecture of professional knowledge in the aviation world. We're dissecting the syllabus for IAB11567 Aviation Terminology 2. Our mission is to look past the jargon and really show you how comprehensive, career-ready expertise is built, from the ground up.
And I think it's important to understand the stakes right away. In aviation, terminology isn't some secondary skill. Communication is safety.
The primary safety mechanism.
It is. So what looks like a simple language course on paper is, in reality, rigorous training for precise, unambiguous operation. There's just no room for ambiguity.
That sets the stage perfectly for the core mission, which is laid out with real precision in the coursing. They're not just looking for students to memorize a glossary.
Not at all. The aim is to achieve fundamental knowledge of commonly used English terminology in the aviation working context. And they break this down into three really distinct, non-negotiable pillars of mastery.
3 pillars. Okay, so of those 3, which one do you think is most often misunderstood, maybe, or undervalued by someone new to this?
I would argue it's the first one, pronunciation.
Really?
Yeah. People tend to focus on meaning, but in the context of radio communication, with the different accents, different pressures, precise sound is non-negotiable. If you mispronounce a number, say 3 with a the sound instead of tree.
The standard call.
The standard call. Or if you confuse niner with 5, you've just introduced a critical error into the system. It's all about removing that human variability.
So pronunciation is about standardizing the audio signal.
Right.
Then the second pillar is meaning. That's the shared technical understanding.
You're right. You can't use the everyday definition of a word like heavy when you're talking about aircraft weight classes.
Of course. But the third pillar, that's where it all comes together, right?
That's where the rubber meets the runway. Correct use. It's about moving beyond the dictionary and applying terms correctly in various appropriate contexts.
Knowing the definition of approach versus knowing when to say, cleared for the ILS approach, runway 27 right.
Exactly that.
And that's the real operational challenge. I mean, if you're listening, just think about the difference between knowing the word hold and being able to respond correctly to hold short of the active runway. That ability to apply precise language under pressure, that's what this syllabus is teaching.
And that operational focus, it just flows right into the second major piece of the syllabus, which is the sheer scope of it all. This isn't training for just one job.
No, it's explicitly career-focused for their studies, professional practice, and future career development, as it says here.
It's a cross-industry ticket.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because they force the student to get accurate with language across so many different areas. I mean, if we trace a flight, they cover everything. Let's start on the ground. They cover airports,
the physical infrastructure,
and airlines, the organizational structure.
And the terminology for those two is completely different. Airport lingo is about marshaling signals, ramps, gates. Airline lingo is more about fleet management, scheduling codes, that kind of thing.
Right. But then they take a pretty big detour into logistics, into air cargo transportation. Now, I find this area fascinating. Why does cargo need its own dedicated section? It seems so specialized.
Because the stakes there are all about weight, documentation, and dangerous goods.
Oh.
You're not dealing with passenger manifests. You're communicating about hazardous materials with specific classification codes and handling procedures that have to be communicated flawlessly. A single wrong word could ground a shipment, or, much worse.
So the language of customs and specialized containers is just a world away from announcing boarding groups.
Completely.
That makes perfect sense. So after logistics, the course moves into the highest stakes areas. We've got airline operations, the big picture, but then aviation safety and security.
And this is where language becomes about compliance and, frankly, survival. The language has to be instantaneous, universally understood. Think about checklists.
Right. No improvisation.
None. If a checklist says cabin secure, every single crew member has to have an identical picture of what secure means.
And that would also include the language for incident reporting, I assume, where every word could be scrutinized later.
Absolutely. And then finally, they bring it all back to the human element, flight and crew management. This isn't just jargon. It's the language of coordination, of crew resource management, or CRM.
So for you, the learner, this isn't just one skill. It's like a slice through the entire industry. From the person loading cargo to the pilot in the cockpit, it all rests on this foundation.
It's the ultimate foundation.
Yeah.
And the way they enforce this mastery, well, you can see it in the architecture of the assessment itself. The grading plan reveals everything about the industry's priorities.
Okay, so how do they make sure a student actually gets to that correct use in a high-stakes context? How do they test that?
The whole assessment philosophy is focused on three outcomes: knowledge, understanding, and the ability to apply. But it's the weighting of the grades that gives away the secret.
Let's break that down then, because this really is the aha moment.
Yeah.
There are 4 components to the final grade.
Right. On the traditional academic side, you've got the final examination. That's weighted at 30%.
Okay,
Standard, it tests your formal knowledge. And then you have regular quizzes at 20% to keep you engaged week to week. So half the grade, 50%, is standard academic testing.
But the other 50%, that's where the culture of aviation just becomes crystal clear. We have presentations weighted at 20%. Now, that aligns perfectly with that correct use pillar. But why dedicate a fifth of the entire grade to a performance skill?
Because theoretical knowledge is basically worthless if you can't articulate it clearly, effectively, and, under a bit of pressure. Our presentation is a proxy for an operational briefing.
For training a new crew member, maybe.
Exactly. If you fumble the terminology there, you fail the practical test.
Okay, that makes sense. But the true outlier, the number that just jumps off the page, is class attendance. It's weighted at a massive 30%.
A full 30%.
The same as the final exam. For just showing up, what does that tell you about the professional standards they're trying to instill?
It tells you that reliability, that consistent presence, is a mandatory requirement for success in this world.
It's a core skill.
It is. A flight can't leave if the mechanic doesn't show up for the briefing. In aviation, every link in the chain matters. This grade structure builds professional accountability right into the course.
So it's not just about learning, it's about demonstrating the professional behavior of dependability.
Absolutely. Think about it. You could be brilliant, get a perfect score on the exam, but if you're casual about attendance, you've already capped your grade at 70%. It fundamentally penalizes brilliance without reliability.
Which is exactly how the real world in that industry works.
It mimics the regulatory environment perfectly.
So when you put it all together, 50% for proving you know the information and 50% for continuous engagement and demonstrating you can apply it, it just shows that this field demands both intellectual mastery and unwavering consistency.
It really does.
So we've taken this deep dive from that core aim mastering, pronunciation, meaning, and use all the way through the huge scope of the curriculum, from cargo to crew management.
And then we've decoded the assessment model, that 3D 20-20-30 split, which really underscores the big lesson here. Fluency in aviation means integrating language into daily operations, safety protocols, and crucially, just being a reliable professional from day one.
And that leaves us with a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over. We saw that 30% of this foundational grade relies purely on persistent presence, on just showing up. So if you look at your own professional life, whether it's in finance or software or medicine, what's the equivalent hidden 30%? What's the weight that's placed on simply being reliable, on being present, even if it's not something you'll ever get a grade on? Something for you to ponder until our next deep dive.